back to my channel. My name is Jerry, and on this channel I love to talk about things, all things spiritual, anything dealing with healing, growth. I love to do tarot videos, so if that's your type of thing, feel free to subscribe and go ahead and like this video because I already know you're gonna like what I have for you today. Today's video's topic, if you haven't seen already, is going to be about shadow work. Now, this is a very frequent topic that we talk about in the spiritual community. People are always asking, how do you do shadow work? Where do I start? What is shadow work? Like all these different questions that I get asked on my TikTok and all those sorts of things. People are always wanting to know about shadow work. What is it? How do you do it? Where do you start? And all of those sorts of things. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. I'm going to give you guys 5 tips for your shadow work journey that I hope will help you and allow you to be more creative with your shadow work, and also just give you more insight about what shadow work is and how you can use it to the best of your ability. Let's go ahead and get into this video, you guys. All right. So first, let's talk about what shadow work is. Now, so we all have our higher self, our shadow self, our ego. You know, there's different parts of us. People always talk about, oh, like our higher self, or I'm trying to reach my higher self, and all those sorts of things. People always want to communicate with their higher self, reach out to their higher self, work with their higher self, but people never really think about their shadow self, the parts of themselves that they don't really want anyone to know about, you know, like those things that you kind of push to the back of your head, like your traumas, the things that you don't really want people to talk about, the kind of hush-hush topics of spirituality and healing, those sorts of things. So doing shadow work is basically working with your darker side. And when I say darker side, I don't mean this like, oh, your evil spirit or anything like that. I don't mean that. When I say your darker side, I just mean the things that are kept in the dark, the things that are kept quiet, the shadow. And so the shadow can be your childhood trauma. It can be recent traumas as well. It can be deep, dark secrets that you have. It can be working through reactions and the way you react to things and all those sorts of things, just kind of figuring out who you are and healing your shadow self. Our shadow selves tend to kind of fester in the dark. They can present themselves in a lot of different ways. For you or for someone who is interested in working with their shadow, it may present itself as being, it can be anger, it can present itself as being anger, it can present itself as being sadness, or just anxiety is another way that your shadow self can present itself. So these are things that kind of we don't really talk about, like the taboo of spirituality and the things that people don't really like to talk about. So when you're doing shadow work, the whole object of shadow work is basically to heal those parts of yourself that you don't want people to see, to heal the parts of yourself that you might be ashamed of, to heal the parts of yourself that might be damaged, that might have been traumatized, those parts of yourself that you don't want people to know about, those parts you don't want people to see, the parts of yourself that even you find it hard to face. That's what facing your shadow is. It's dealing with those traumas that maybe you've been ignoring for years, or those traumas that maybe people have told you, oh, that's just nothing, that's just life. That's not just life. Okay, so when we're working with the shadow, when we're doing shadow work, the whole intention behind it is to heal those parts of yourself, right? Okay, so I have 5 tips for you guys today to work with your shadow, tips that have helped me on my shadow work journey, because shadow work can be different from person to person. Some people like to do prompts, some people don't, so it's completely up to you the way that you do shadow work. Sometimes your shadow might need attention in that very moment, and maybe you don't have a prompt. So some people like to talk to themselves in the moment. Why am I feeling this way? What has caused me to feel this way? And all those sorts of things. Basically, identifying triggers is another way that you can word that. So we're gonna go ahead and get into those 5 tips that I have for you guys today with working with your shadow. So my first tip for you guys is don't neglect it, okay? So a very common thing that we do when working with our shadow, or just kind of in general, is we'll neglect the things that we feel like we don't want to deal with. We'll neglect the things that we feel like are going to be hard to deal with, or the things that we are scared to deal with. And that I'll go more into that in my second tip. But with the first tip, don't neglect it. We tend to try and push things down, push it to the back of your mind, and move on, go on with our day. No matter what, your shadow is going to present itself if you don't heal it, and it can get worse and worse and worse and harder to deal with as time goes on. So if you're young, right, and you discover about shadow work and all those sorts of things when you're young, right, by the time you're 30 and you haven't done any shadow work, you're going to have a lot more to deal with at 30 because you've been neglecting your shadow work this entire time. You've been neglecting your shadow self this entire time. Shadow work is one of the basis of spirituality because you have to heal yourself from so many traumas and so many things that you've been through. Sometimes shadow work is freeing yourself from religious traumas. Like some of us have been traumatized from the religion that we're leaving and going into spirituality, trying to escape from that religion. But if you still have those beliefs, if your shadow self is still traumatized from those beliefs, then you're not going to have a way to really escape, because those beliefs are going to follow you into your spiritual work, into your spiritual journey. So you don't want to neglect your shadow self. You don't want to neglect your shadow work, because eventually it's basically, think of it as like a ball collecting dust, right? So when you first have a little dust ball, it's very small. Like it could just be something such as like, oh, when I was a kid, like I got told no a lot, like my needs weren't met, just something that starts it all off. And as the years goes on, as it collects more dust, as your dust ball gets bigger, it just gets harder and harder and harder to break it down and remove all the dust particles that have built up. So the longer you wait, I'm not going to say the worse it gets, but the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be to face your shadow. There's going to be a lot more things that you have to do to work with your shadow the longer that you wait. So the sooner the better when it comes to shadow work. The sooner you can start doing it, the better you'll be off and more likely you'll be to have a more successful or a more understanding of your true authentic self, if that makes sense. Neglecting your shadow won't help you find enlightenment on this journey, because while you're trying to work with your higher self, you have to remember, what's that bug? Ciao. I'm gonna need you to go. The more that you neglect your shadow, the longer you neglect it, it's not going to help you on your enlightenment journey. It's not going to help you find enlightenment, because while you're trying to work with your higher self, you have to remember you're still holding on to all the baggage from your shadow self. And this isn't to say that your shadow self will never be enlightened or your shadow self will never be healed. It's just that the longer that you wait, the harder it's going to be to heal. You'll have a lot more to work through than if you start now and then continue that, because shadow work is continuous. It's something that you're always doing. So just continuously work on your shadow. Now, my second tip is do not be afraid. Fear not, as the angels say when they present themselves to you. Do not be afraid, because we kind of have this stigma around the shadow self, like, oh, it's something so dark and scary, like, oh my gosh, like everyone needs to work on their shadow, because if you don't, like terrible things. And people always say those sorts of things in the spiritual community. Like I've seen it on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook. Oh, you have to do your shadow work or you're gonna fail. Like there's no point in doing your spiritual journey if you're not doing shadow work at all. Okay, so that's true to some extent. You do have to do your shadow work, but I believe in everyone moves at their own pace. But once again, you don't want to be fearful, because a lot of things happen on your spiritual journey. You may start to see spirits, and for some of us that could be really scary, especially if we come from a religion that taught that that was terrible. Like seeing a spirit means that, oh, demons are going to get you. Like some of us come from those sorts of backgrounds when we're moving on to our spiritual journey. So the best thing for your shadow work and shadow self is to not be afraid, because ultimately that's still a part of you. You're still looking at yourself when you're looking at your shadow. You're just looking at the parts of yourself that you've been trying to hide, like this deep, dark secrets that you've been trying to keep for yourself, right? So when you are working with your shadow and doing those things and kind of allowing yourself to be authentic and be true with yourself, that is so helpful. And also not holding that fear with your shadow, because ultimately that is going to make things harder. If every time that you start doing shadow work or you're fearful of your shadow self, like a lot of times when we feel like we're being watched, or when we feel like, oh, there's a entity in here, most of the time that's your shadow self being like, hey girl, I need some help. Like I need you to help me so I can help you, because ultimately our shadow isn't here to harm us. Our shadow isn't here to hurt us or hold us down or possess us or anything like that. Our shadow self is here to allow us to face our traumas, face our fears, and ultimately relieve us of a lot of things that we've been holding on to for years, so that we can flourish and achieve the things that we want to achieve. Our shadow self is here to show us what's wrong, and so that we can make it right and thus further ourselves on our journey. So you want to make sure that you're not afraid of your shadow self. Make sure that you're not fearing shadow work, because shadow work is kind of the equivalent to therapy. Like, it's more of a form of self-therapy, like discussing with yourself the things that have gone on in your life, especially if you're the type of person who doesn't really like to talk to other people about your problems. This could be something that truly helps you. So you want to make sure when you're doing your shadow work, you're not afraid, you're not fearful of what may come. Some of us cry during shadow work. Some of us end up having to like punch the pillows and release the feelings, because sometimes with shadow work, those old feelings that we had that caused like another dust particle to go on our dust ball, those old feelings come up again. So for a lot of us, it may be very hard to start working with our shadow because of all the things that we've been through in our life, because of everything that has happened in our life. But you don't want to be afraid, because remember that no matter what, your shadow self is always going to be with you. It's always going to be a part of you, because it is you. It's just the versions of you that you don't want people to know about. And that can be scary, because some of us have a really dark, like heavy shadow that we have to work through. So it can be scary to tackle those things, but you don't want to be afraid of your shadow itself. You don't want to be afraid of your shadow self in itself, if that makes sense. Number 3 is be honest. Some of us have a very strong tendency to lie to ourselves. Now, I used to be this type of person. I would not want to be completely honest with myself. Like, it's very hard to be honest with yourself sometimes, especially when it comes to shadow work, because sometimes you were in the wrong in certain situations. Like, sometimes you're the person who caused this drama, or the one who kind of added this dust particle to your own dust ball. So sometimes we do want to lie and kind of make it seem like, oh, well, I was in the wrong, but I'm going to heal from this person anyway. Like, it wasn't my fault. Like, you do have to take accountability when it comes to your shadow work, when it comes to working with your shadow. So you do want to make sure that you're being 100% honest, no matter what. If you're doing prompts, if you're doing video diaries, which I will talk more about in another tip, but if you're doing prompts, if you're doing video diaries, if you're directly talking to someone, sometimes me and my partner, we like to talk about things that could pertain to the shadow, but we love to kind of have debates and talk about things that we've went through in childhood. That really helps me when it comes to dealing with my shadow, to have someone that I trust and someone that I love and someone who loves me for who I am, to be able to talk to them about what is truly bothering me, or what I feel like some of my behaviors stem from. And that helps me kind of evaluate myself from an outer perspective as well, because him looking in and being 100% honest about what's going on, like all sort of things, like, why are you acting like this? Why do you feel like you're acting like this? Like, having someone ask you those questions who loves you, sometimes knowing them can help, because with therapists, we don't really know them. We don't know that they have their own struggles as well. So when we're going to therapy, it can be like, well, this person's asking me all these questions and it seems like they don't even have stuff going on in their life. But when you know the person and they're asking you the questions and you know them, it definitely helps us, because it's like, okay, well, I know you. I know that you have struggles as well. So we can help each other through our struggles, right? So you do want to make sure you're being 100% honest, because that, if you're lying when you're doing your shadow work, if you're doing the prompt and the prompt is, oh, have you ever cheated on someone, right? Let's say that. And that could be something that some of us struggle with, or some of us might struggle with being cheated on. But if the prompt is, have you ever cheated on someone? And you're like, I didn't cheat on someone. They cheated on me first, and I just cheated back for them to get revenge. That's even more of a thing that you need to touch on. Why did you feel like you needed revenge? But if you're just saying like, oh yeah, technically I never cheated on them because they cheated on me first, I just got my lick back. And that's more this fly with the flowers and the cactus, and oh my gosh, with all those things going on. And if you are lying and saying, I technically haven't cheated on anyone, I just cheated back, that's even more so of a reason to do shadow work. Why did you feel like you needed that revenge? Why did you feel like you had to get your lick back? Why couldn't you have healed from being cheated on, left that person, and moved on with your life? Why did you feel like you needed to do that, you know? So that could be even more of a reason to do shadow work. And you want to make sure that you're not lying, because you lying to your shadow or you lying during your shadow work isn't going to get you anywhere. It's just giving false confidence, like, oh yeah, I did my shadow work, but really you just lied on every single prompt, and you lied in the videos, and you weren't being honest with yourself. So that's even more like, why are you lying? Why are you a liar? You know, like why do I feel the need to lie even when it's only to myself? Lying to yourself can even be a much more deeper topic with shadow work. Like, why do you feel like you have to lie to yourself? Because if you don't know yourself truly, then who really knows you? If you don't know who you are, then does the person that you love truly know who you are, right? If you don't know what you are, who you are, what you like, what you don't like, how can anyone else outside of you know? You know, so you want to make sure that you're not lying when you're doing your shadow work, even if you are the bad guy, even if you're the person who is the issue in a relationship or the issue in a situation. You just want to be honest with yourself and be like, well, why did I do those things in that situation? What triggered me to feel like I needed revenge in the first place, you know? So be honest with yourself. Tip number 4 is look in the mirror. So we all know that Michael Jackson song, I'm asking the man in the mirror, I'm asking him to change his ways, right? So with mirror gazing, that's something that we're going to talk about. Mirror gazing with shadow work. When you look in the mirror, some of us already know about this, but when you're mirror gazing and you're just sitting, breathing, just looking at yourself in the mirror, sometimes your face can morph. And sometimes it can morph into your mother or your father or a family member or someone who's hurt you, or it can just morph into a more distraught version of yourself. That typically is something that either you need to heal, or if it morphs into a more distraught version of yourself, that can indicate that there's shadow work that needs to be done. And mirror gazing is something that I love to practice. Even with my self-love altar, I love to mirror gaze and tell myself affirmations. But with shadow work, when I'm mirror gazing, I try to ask myself the prompt. So if I have a prompt, I'll mirror gaze and be like, oh, the prompt is blah, blah, and blah, or not necessarily saying the prompt is, but just saying the prompt to myself in the mirror, and then kind of assessing with myself while looking in the mirror how this prompt affects me, if this prompt resonates with me, what I need to heal from in terms of this prompt. And that's something that can definitely help you. Mirror work is a very strong spiritual practice. So you do want to make sure that your mirrors are locked and protected if you're doing this. You do want to make sure that you're kind of protecting yourself when doing this, because mirrors can be portals. So this is something that you kind of want to be careful with. Not saying that anything bad can happen from it, but you just want to be cautious. Even having some Palo Santo or some cleansing herbs lit while doing this can help you stay protected when doing these things. Mirror work is something that I really suggest doing even before you start doing your shadow work, because if you can look in the mirror and you just gaze and you're just looking at yourself. Like one time I remember I was mirror gazing and I turned into my brother, then I turned into my uncle, then I turned into my dad. So I feel like for me personally, that really resonated with me, and most of the men in my life kind of separated themselves from me for one reason or another, whether it was willingly or unwillingly. So this is something that I realized when I was doing that, like I would see them come into me because I still had traumas and I still had strings attached to the things that these people had done to me. So that is another way that you can kind of assess your shadow work. And even if you don't turn into anyone, like I said, if you feel like your face kind of morphs into a more distraught version of yourself, like sometimes it may look like your eye is melting off, or like your smile is like weird and all that kind of stuff, that can kind of help you assess yourself in terms of your shadow work and work on things. My number 5 tip is do video diaries. So this is one of my most valuable tips I feel like I gave in this video. Also, feel free to comment below if you want more tips, because I do have them. So if you want more tips on shadow work, feel free to comment down below. Video diaries. So this is something that can help us, because with videos, you can still see yourself when you're doing the video. If you're doing it on your laptop, if you're doing it on your phone, you can still see yourself, right? So when you're looking at yourself, you can be honest with yourself with doing shadow work. For me personally, this is my favorite way to do shadow work. This is the way that I always do it. Like sometimes I'll do the mirror work here and there, but for the most part, if I'm doing shadow work, I'm on my laptop, taking a video, talking to myself. So with this version of shadow work, this is something that many people don't talk about, actually, that this is something that you can do. People will always say, oh, do your shadow work, grab you a journal. Some of us don't like writing. Me personally, I do like writing, but it just seems like when I'm doing shadow work, I have a lot to talk about, and I really am kind of impatient, so I don't like to sit there and write like 5 pages worth about one topic, like this and this and this, because so much seems to come out when we're doing our shadow work. So I don't really like to write it out. I do still do the writing as I do the video diaries. So for me personally, when I'm doing my shadow work on my video, I like to open my computer, hit record, and talk about the prompt. And I will talk about it with myself, how I feel like this prompt affects me, how it resonates with me, how I can heal from it, and all those sorts of things. And then after I do that, I like to grab my shadow work journal, write down the prompt, the date, and whatever else I want to. And then I like to write the key details and what I feel like I learned from that video. So I remember one time one of the prompts was, do you feel like you hold on to guilt? And I discussed that with myself, and I really figured out a lot about myself when it comes to guilt and feeling guilty. I feel like a lot of times I don't make myself feel guilty on my own. It's that I'm scared that people will feel some sort of way if I do something, and then I feel guilty because of what I think other people think. So that was something that really helped me, was being able to say everything that I need to say out loud. And once again, like I said in my last video, your tongue is the most powerful thing that you have. Your throat chakra is very, very powerful. So talking things out can help you so much when doing shadow work. So this is something that I really like to do in terms of shadow work. I love to record the video, then grab my journal, talk about what I learned in the video, what I took from the shadow work video, and what I can do in my waking life now that I know how this thing affects me, right? So that's something that I love to do, and I hope that you love to do it too if you try it out. All right, you guys, so I know this video is probably a little bit shorter than what my other videos are. I typically try to go for about 30 minutes, but this video was just a quick, simple video because I was just trying to give you guys some tips on how to do your shadow work, since a lot of people ask me how to do shadow work, since it's something I'm kind of an advocate for, like do your shadow work, like heal yourself before you start doing spells, you know? So that's something that people always ask me, like how to do it, where do I start, what do I do, all those questions. So I hope that this kind of gave you some insight on what you can do in terms of your shadow work. I hope that everyone could learn something or gain something from this video. And like I said previously, go ahead and comment down below if you want another video with some shadow work tips or any other videos that you want to see from me. I'm happy to provide for you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. And if you're not, feel free to subscribe so you can get more videos like this one. Thank you guys so much. Bye.